Squeaky brakes are one of the most embarrassing things to go wrong with your bike. If they're bad enough, loud enough, it can actually put you off from even using them at all, which is obviously not good. And then if you do have to use them, you will instantly lose friends. But they're not inevitable though. They are avoidable with these tips. Firstly, what causes squeaky brakes? Well, it's vibration of the pads against the rim or your pads against your disc rotor, depending on which system you use. So what we're looking to do now then is very simply stop whatever is causing those vibrations to start. Now, when you look at it objectively, a braking system is a very simple system and we take it for granted. So the first place to start is just to give it a bit of TLC and give everything a really thorough clean, because residue that can build up on the rims and pads that can get glazed over are actually one of the causes for that high-pitched squealing. So give everything a really thorough clean with some soapy water, and then when you look at your pads, if they're shiny at all, then you need to just take some light emery paper or a file and just take off that very top surface. The next step is the most important one, and it's towing your brake pads in. So that is when the trailing edge of the pad, so the bit that's towards the front of the bike, hits the rim just fractionally before the rest of the pad. And when I say fractionally, I mean like a couple of millimeters or something. And to do it is actually really straightforward. You want to take a piece of card, like a coffee shop loyalty card, fold it to the desired thickness, so in half generally, and then put that between the pad and the rim at the rear of the pad. Then when you apply your brakes, that will be held in place. Then you want to take an Allen key and loosen the pad clamp holder bolt, and that will cause the pad to reset very slightly with its position. Then all you've got to do is retighten the bolt, and hey presto, you have perfectly towed in brake pads. Now, if that hasn't stopped your brake squeal yet, then I will admit it is getting harder to find the cause. So the next step would be to check the caliper bolt for tightness. So that's the bolt on the back of your forks here or on the seat stay bridge there. Or if you're using cantilever brakes, then check the pivot bolts for tightness, because in either case, it could be that the actual brake itself is moving and causing the vibration. So what about disc users then? What is the cause of squeaky disc brakes? Well, given that for most of us, disc brakes are a new thing on road bikes or cyclocross bikes, we thought we'd take the opportunity to ask the guys over at the Global Mountain Bike Network for their tips. So, over to them.
Okay, so I've got some experience with a road bike, but mainly with a mountain bike and disc brakes on mountain bikes. The first thing I would do is check the condition of the brake pads and the disc itself. There's a couple of reasons why they might be making a noise. First thing I would do is check that the bolts are nice and tight, so either 6-bolt or center mount. Tighten that up and then give the disc a spin, keeping your fingers away, and make sure that the disc is running nice and straight. If the disc is slightly bent, you might get away with just trying to bend it back into shape a little bit with an adjustable spanner. If it's too bent, you're going to have to replace it. Also make sure that the disc is centered in the caliper, so you can slide the caliper around and make sure it spins freely inside there. Another thing to check visually is that the brake pads aren't too worn. If they're really worn out, there's a metal spring that sits in between them, and that can rub on the disc brake, making quite a lot of noise. So the main reason why disc brakes howl and squeal is because the brake disc pads are contaminated, and usually that's because of overspray when lubing the chain. So be really careful not to get oil onto that disc brake or onto the pads, because that will stop the brakes working very well at all, and they will make that noise. So there's a couple of ways of getting rid of that if that does happen. The first is just to wet them down and use them over and over. So just using clean water or a little bit of mud, that might get rid of some of that oil. Or if it's really bad, you can sometimes use a blowtorch to boil that oil off or replace the pads themselves. The last reason that disc brakes could be making a noise is that the brake pads have got glazed over, and that happens when they get too hot. So take the disc brake pads out, and if they've got a really shiny surface, then that's probably the case, and just use a file to carefully remove a tiny bit of that initial surface to get them working properly again.
So very simply then, clean your brake pads, your rims or your rotors, and then if you're using rim brakes, make sure they are towed in correctly. And then if unfortunately this hasn't still resolved your squeaky brake situation, it may be a case of actually investing in some new brake pads themselves, because sometimes the fault for squeaky brakes lies with them. Now, for some more braking tips on how to improve your braking performance, in fact, in the workshop, why not click just down there? Or to actually improve your braking performance out on the road with your technique, then click just down there. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to GCN. To do that, just click on the globe.